In this video, we're going to review the steps it takes to solve an equation. Now remember, solving equations, you're essentially undoing what has been done, the operations that have been done. And so you could also call that your inverses and that sort of thing. So when you're looking at equations, you want to first evaluate what is the equation saying, and then what's the opposite? What are the opposite operations of what's being done already? So in this equation that we have here, x plus 3 equals 7. All right, so we're adding. We can see that we are adding 3 to an unknown number to give us 7. Now, most of you can look at that and go ahead and evaluate that in your head, and you know that the answer is going to be 4. But since we're trying to get into the process here of solving more complex equations, it's going to be important that we actually understand the steps it takes to get that 4. So, again, what I said was we have to do the opposite operation or the inverse operation of what has been done. So we're looking at x plus 3. What's the opposite of adding anything? It's subtracting. So what we want to do, our goal is again to get this x by itself. Okay, and that's why you do the opposite operation. Okay, so since the opposite of adding 3 is subtracting 3, we're going to subtract 3 from this side of the equal sign. You're going to hear me referring to what you do to one side, you do to the other. I'm talking about this equal sign. This equal sign is kind of a barrier between the two sides of an equation. What you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other. You have to keep equations balanced. All right, so we're going to subtract 3 from this side of the equation. Again, what you do to one, you do to the other. So we subtract 3 from this side of our equation. When I do x plus 3 minus 3, this right here equals 0. So I'm left with x on this side of the equal sign. Here I have 7 minus 3, which is going to leave me with 4. Okay, so what step did I take to solve this equation? I subtracted 3 from both sides. Okay, all right, now if I get into a more complex equation like 2x minus 1 equals, let's do 9. Okay, so here I have 2 operations that are being done in this equation. I have 2x, and there's my cat Killer, who's going to help us solve equations apparently. Okay, I need you to get down. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we have 2x minus 1, and Killer is still wanting to help us solve the equations. I apologize for that. Okay, anytime you have a number sitting beside a variable, what operation is that indicating? Well, that's indicating multiplication. Okay, and then here I have minus 1. Well, that's subtraction. All right, so now you've got to determine what operation do you undo first. Let's go back to our order of operations. You remember your order of operations that I think some of you might call it PEMDAS? Okay, we're going to focus on this area right here, the multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. When you're doing your order of operations, that's the order that you follow. You do your multiplication and division first, then you do your addition and subtraction. When you're solving an equation, however, you do the opposite. You do your addition and subtraction first, then you do the multiplication and division. Okay? Now, when you start adding in exponents and parentheses and grouping symbols, of course, some of those rules are going to have to be modified just a little bit. But when you have a two-step equation like this one that we see here, you're going to follow this rule. Adding and subtracting first, multiplication and division second. All right, so here we have subtraction, here we have multiplication. We're going to have to undo by undoing our subtraction first. So what's the opposite of subtraction? Hopefully, you're saying addition. And what I do to one side of my equal sign, I have to do to the other. All right, so when I add 1 to negative 1, that gives me 0. So I'm left with 2x equals, and 9 plus 1 gives me 10. All right, so now I have 2x, which is the same thing as saying 2 times x. Well, what's the opposite of multiplying? Dividing. So I'm going to divide by 2. And what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So over here, 2x divided by 2, well, 2 divided by 2 is 1. So I'm left with x. And 10 divided by 2 is 5. Now, if I want to double check and make sure I work my equation out correctly, if I have found that x equals 5, I'm going to take that 5 and substitute it in for the x. So I'm going to say 2 times 5 minus 1, hopefully, is going to equal 9. 2 times 5 is 10. 10 minus 1 is 9. 9 equals 9. So my solution here, this 5, is correct.